You probably know exactly what happens when someone dies today. A phone call is made. People gather. There are rituals, ceremonies, photographs, flowers, words, and places built specifically for grief. It feels normal, but the real answer is far stranger. Because long before cities, religions, cemeteries, and written language, your ancestors faced the same mystery. Someone they loved stopped moving, stopped speaking, stopped breathing, and nobody knew why. What do you do when death exists but explanations? Do not imagine waking up in a small prehistoric camp. The sun has barely risen. The fire is cold. A familiar face is lying nearby. Something is wrong. You wait for them to stand up, but they never do. You call their name in whatever sounds your people use to communicate. Nothing happens. You touch their shoulder. Still nothing. For most of human history, death arrived without warning and without understanding. There were no doctors, no biology textbooks, no concept of cells, organs, bacteria, or disease. There was only experience, and experience taught one simple lesson. Yesterday this person was alive. Today they are not. Why? That question may have shaped human culture more than almost any other. Some of the oldest clues come from ancient burials. At a site called Cima de los Huesos in Spain, researchers discovered the remains of dozens of ancient humans deep inside a cave. Some scientists believe the bodies may have been deliberately placed there hundreds of thousands of years ago. If that interpretation is correct, it suggests something remarkable. Even very ancient humans may have treated the dead differently from ordinary objects. Why would they do that? Because death creates a problem the brain cannot easily solve. Your brain is built to understand people as thinking beings. Even today, when someone dies, part of your mind still expects them to answer a message or walk through a door. Psychologists call this continuing social representation. The mental model remains active long after the person is gone. Ancient humans likely experienced something similar. The body was present, the person was absent. How could both things be true at once? This puzzle may have encouraged some of humanity's earliest spiritual ideas. The archaeologist Stephen Mithen has argued that growing cognitive abilities allowed ancient humans to think symbolically about invisible concepts. Death may have become one of the most powerful invisible concepts of all. You cannot see life itself. You only notice when it disappears, and that disappearance demands an explanation. Evidence from prehistoric graves suggests people often did more than simply abandon bodies. At sites across Europe and the Middle East, archaeologists have found individuals buried carefully. Some were placed in specific positions, some were accompanied by tools, others were covered with red ochre, a natural pigment that resembles blood. Why use precious materials on someone who could no longer use them? One possibility is practical, another is emotional, a third is symbolic. The truth may have involved all three. Death is not only a biological event, it is also a social event. When one member of a small band disappears, the entire group changes. A hunter is gone, a parent is gone, a storyteller is gone, a friend is gone. The community suddenly has a hole in its structure. Could rituals have helped repair that hole? Many anthropologists think so. The researcher Robert Hertz argued that funerary practices help societies adapt to loss. They create a bridge between chaos and stability. Even today, funerals often serve that purpose. Prehistoric rituals may have done the same thing. Not because ancient humans were primitive, because they were human. Grief is ancient, far older than civilization, far older than farming, perhaps even older than our species. In fact, humans may not be the only creatures that mourn. Researchers have observed elephants lingering around the bones of dead relatives. Chimpanzees sometimes remain beside deceased group members for extended periods. Some whale species appear to carry dead calves for days. The scientist Barbara J. King has documented many examples suggesting animals experience something resembling grief. If other animals react emotionally to death, imagine how powerful those emotions became once humans developed language, memory, and imagination. Now death could be discussed, remembered, explained, questioned, feared. What happened after burial? That depended on the group. Some communities appeared to have buried their dead beneath living spaces. Others placed bodies in caves. Some may have returned repeatedly to burial locations. Archaeological evidence from sites in the Levant suggests that skulls were sometimes preserved or revisited long after death. To modern eyes, this can seem unsettling. To ancient people, it may have felt comforting. The dead were gone, but not completely gone. Memory kept them present. This is where death becomes more than a mystery. It becomes a story. Humans are storytelling animals. You constantly build narratives to explain the world. When something important happens, your brain asks what it means. Death is the most important event most people will ever encounter. A random accident feels unsatisfying. A meaningful explanation feels better. This tendency may have helped create beliefs about ancestors, spirits, and afterlives. Not because ancient humans were irrational, because human minds naturally search for causes. The cognitive scientist Pascal Boyer has argued that religious ideas often emerge from ordinary mental systems, trying to interpret extraordinary experiences. Death is perhaps the ultimate extraordinary experience. Everyone sees it, nobody experiences it, and returns with certainty. The gap invites imagination, and imagination fills gaps quickly. Yet prehistoric death was not always gentle. Life expectancy was shorter. Injuries were common. Predators existed. Disease spread without modern medicine. Child mortality was extremely high. Many people likely encountered death from an early age. That familiarity may sound depressing, but it probably changed how communities understood life. When death is rare, it feels shocking. When death is common, it becomes woven into daily existence. Ancient humans still grieved, but they may also have developed stronger cultural tools for coping with loss. Rituals create predictability. Predictability reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is one of the brain's greatest sources of stress. The neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett has written extensively about how the brain constantly predicts what comes next. Death destroys prediction. Someone who was always there is suddenly absent. The future changes instantly. Funeral practices may have helped ancient brains rebuild a stable model of reality. In other words, rituals were not merely about the dead, they were also about the living. There is another fascinating possibility. Funerals may have helped humans cooperate. Think about a small prehistoric group. Resources are limited. Time is valuable. Energy matters, yet people sometimes devoted considerable effort to handling the dead. Why invest those resources? Because shared rituals strengthen social bonds. Everyone participates. Everyone remembers. Everyone demonstrates loyalty to the group. The message becomes clear. You matter here, even after death. That message has enormous power. Trust grows when people believe they will not be forgotten. Cooperation becomes easier when communities share emotional experiences. In that sense, the treatment of the dead may have helped the living survive. Strange as it sounds, graves may have contributed to human success. The archaeologist Paul Pettit has suggested that mortuary behavior reveals important changes in human cognition and social organization. Burials are not merely evidence of death. They are evidence of meaning, and meaning changes everything. Consider one of the most famous prehistoric burial sites. At Sungir in Russia, researchers discovered individuals buried with thousands of ivory beads and carefully crafted objects. Creating those items required enormous effort. The investment was extraordinary. Why spend so much energy on people who could not use the gifts? Because the burial was not really for the deceased, it was for everyone else. It communicated values. Status, identity, memory, perhaps even hope. The living were telling themselves a story about who they were. Humans still do this today. Different cultures use different symbols, different words, different ceremonies. Yet the underlying goal often remains surprisingly similar. Make sense of loss, preserve connection, create order from chaos. Thousands of years separate modern funerals from prehistoric burials, but the emotional logic feels familiar. You leave flowers, ancient humans left pigments, you place photographs. Ancient humans placed tools. You gather together. Ancient humans gathered together. The details changed. The need did not. This continuity reveals something profound about your species. Technology transformed the world. Cities appeared. Empires rose and fell. Science uncovered the mechanics of life, yet grief remained recognizable. A person disappears. The mind struggles to accept it. The community responds. A ritual begins. In some ways, every funeral happening today contains echoes of fires that burned before recorded history. Every memorial carries traces of ancient questions. Where did they go? Why did this happen? How do you continue without them? Nobody knows exactly what every prehistoric community believed. The evidence is incomplete, the story is fragmented, but the fragments tell us enough. Your ancestors cared, they remembered, they mourned, they searched for meaning, and that search may have helped make us human. The next time you attend a funeral, visit a cemetery, or think about someone you have lost, you are participating in something unimaginably old. Not a modern tradition, not a recent invention, a behavior stretching back through thousands upon thousands of generations. A chain of grief, memory, love, and ritual connecting you to people whose names disappeared long ago, people who sat beside fires, people who looked at the stars, people who faced the same mystery and tried to answer, and in the only way they could. You probably know exactly what happens when someone dies today, but now you can see that behind every modern ritual stands a much older question, asked by your ancestors long before history began.